welcome golfers to the 28th episode of the Read It, Roll It, Hole It podcast. Today we've got a special guest from US&A, Damon Goddard on the call. How are you, Damon?
Doing great, man. Doing great. I appreciate you guys having me on. And I guess, Happy New Year by the time everyone's listening to this. So I appreciate you bringing me on. Looking forward to hopefully entertaining a little bit. So yes, we'll get some good info going out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Super excited. So, so you're a sports performance and nutrition coach. You've worked with some of the best golfers and athletes of the world. To name one, maybe I think Jordan Speith stands out. You've been working with him for 12 years. Is that right?
Yeah. I started working with him when he was just turned 16 years old. So we've been working with him quite a long time, and seeing the development of him throughout the years, through college and then turning pro, and I guess a wee bit of college, not a lot of college, but he turned pro fairly early. But yeah, it's been a great time developing a guy like him, and seeing these other younger players come into the ranks as well. All of us have seen the evolution of the game with a lot of the more young athletes coming into play, and to be able to call a 26, 27-year-old kind of an old athlete on tour is pretty common now, and so now it's kind of, we're trying to keep up with the young guys coming into play with 20, 21-year-olds.
That's interesting. Jordan Speith, the old guy. I like it. We always remember him. Well, he's still going strong. But
he's still young. Yeah,
he's still young. But he's been around quite a long time, so it seems like he's old. But we'll come on to Jordan. I'd love to sort of pick your brains on him. But to start with, Damon, I want to know more about Damon, right? So tell us the story, your story.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll give the 10,000 foot looking down version of how I got to where I'm at right now. So, I've been in the sports performance world for 20 years, over 20 years, and it all started actually when I was 16 years old. And so I played, here, unfortunately, in the States, we call it soccer. I have no idea why, but so I was playing football. The real football. And so when I was 16 years old, I had a really massive knee injury, right? And so the track that I was going on at that point is I could have picked any college that I wanted to go to play. And, I had aspirations to go play pro as well. And with that knee injury, it really, took me off track, right, when I was 16 years old. And so it was really a good time in the teenage years, especially because you're just trying to figure out who the heck you are, right? But at the same time, you're like, who the heck, where the heck am I going with my life, right? So I had to sit back and make a choice and understand, okay, I need to overcome this injury, because I know I still want to have these aspirations of playing college and playing pro. But when you have a medical doctor saying, hey, listen, your aspiration in sports needs to be quelched, because it's not going to happen. And so I'm fairly stubborn, always have been. And I said, I'm not going to listen to that type of edict. I want to overcome that big type of statement. And so when I was 16 years old, I became very enamored with the physical therapy process. It was just one of those things where, how do you take somebody that had such an injury, and you were able to rehab them, and then from rehab get them into full performance again. And when I was 16-year-old, I fell in love with that entire process of developing an athlete and being able to rehab an athlete, and then taking them from rehab to full performance. And so I knew exactly when I was 16 years old what I wanted to study and what I wanted to become professionally, if you will, from a career standpoint. I knew I wanted to get into sports performance. But luckily enough, I was able to get back in playing. Within about 10 months, I was back on the pitch, and was able to go play college, and I had a very, very minor career professionally as well here in the States. but that fed this whole mechanism of I finished in college with the biology and a lot of the kinesiology, anatomy, physiology. I really put the emphasis on that, and then I wanted to take it to the next level. So all of my advanced studies have been in biomechanics and as you mentioned, nutrition as well, and so functional nutrition. And I always had an aspiration to work with athletes. I've always been around athletes my entire life. My dad was an American football coach, so I've always been around athletes, and I wanted to be in that realm. And so starting off, I actually worked with a lot of basketball, a lot of hockey, a lot of golly, what else I have? Football, I had hockey, basketball, and baseball. And it was about, I'd say about 15 years ago in my career where I had these funny golfers coming in, right? And I'm gonna be honest, I had maybe picked up the sticks 2 or 3 times, right? And at that point was absolutely atrocious in golf, absolutely atrocious. But I had, I built this facility, and for some dumb reason, I put this, golf room in there where I had 2-dimensional analysis. I had a V1 system in there. And I just don't even know why I did it at the time, but now I do. And I said, man, I'm really intrigued in golf. And so it innately attracted a lot of golfers to just go into the hitting bay and use video analysis. And I brought a couple of instructors into this facility to kind of coach guys. But the more I started to, watch the golfer move and hear the instructor, coach, and I really started to understand the golf swing exceptionally well. And I could break it down from the whole, if this is going on in the body, then this is going to happen in the swing, and then vice versa. And so the mechanics of being able to work with the golfer and escalate their performance to a higher level became very natural to me. And so, fast forward, I started working with a lot of the PGA players, started to travel a little bit and listen. I mean, when you take a look at the trailers back then, there was barely anybody that used them. But you fast track that to now, I mean, you can barely move in these trailers. Every one of these players has evolved to understand integrating, the performance piece and integrating the nutrition piece, integrating the mental piece. Now is, if you're not doing that, it's not a good thing, right? But 15 years ago, if you were doing fitness, everyone would say, oh, you don't want to gain too much muscle, or you don't want to work out too much because it's going to change your swing, and all this stuff. So it was an interesting trailblazing type battle to help the athlete, the golf athlete, understand integrating the performance piece is actually going to A, reduce the risk of injury, but then B, increase your performance out on the course. And then, implementing a lot of the recovery strategies as well. Now the athletes start to understand, wait a minute, this is really helping me play to full performance on a Sunday afternoon, feeling as great as I did on a Thursday. So maybe there might be something to this, right? And so I'm so happy to see that integrating all these components has really caught on at the professional level, and then trickling down now into the amateurs and the junior levels is everyone understanding the fitness piece and the performance piece is paramount in order to adopt the mentality of going, wait a minute, we are athletes. And this is a very rigorous movement, and quite honestly, a very unnatural movement, and it's like a small car crash every single time I swing the golf club. So I probably need to prepare the body in order to withstand the rigors of it, right? And so, goodness, so fast track to this point, still work with a lot of the, some of the, professional basketball players and some of the baseball players as well. But my world is professional golf, and on the women's side and on the men's side as well. I still work with a lot of juniors, and then, at this point in the career, doing a lot more of the educational pieces. So, one of my more fun projects that I just worked on was developing a whole golf performance curriculum, or helping to develop the whole golf performance curriculum for Techno Gym. And that was an absolute blast. And so now it's more into the educational piece, but I'm still in the training trenches as well with the athletes. I'll never get out of that just because I love it. and then, working with the athletes as well. So it's been a blast in the career. I've seen some amazing, things in my career, some amazing accomplishments within, obviously winning majors and championships and all that is a lot of fun, and indelible moments. But at the same time, I kind of find when I have an individual that comes in and they haven't been able to play 18 without pain, and being able to work with them, and at the point where, a couple months down the road, they give me the text and go, hey, listen, they just played 18, zero pain. Man, I feel like a new person now. To me, that's a major as well, right? And so I can find the elements of wins at the minute level, but obviously it's really easy to understand it at the major level, right? And getting the trophies and getting the jackets. But when I can enhance somebody's ability to play without pain, or to just simply live their normal life without pain, or even with a lot more vigor, then all of a sudden I go, you know what, that was a really big win for me, and a win for the client. And so that, I think if I can maintain that balance of understanding that wins come in very small ways as well as the big ones, then it makes my career a lot more fun.
Fascinating to hear the sort of career and the evolution, if you like, of you as a coach there, from getting injured from football all the way to finding small wins and big wins. That's pretty cool. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, the big takeaway from something like that is, listen, I mean, when we're set back with something, I'm a big believer in, and it seems trite to say, but everything does happen for a reason. For the simple fact that if there's a massive setback in the path that I'm going to be going, right, I always have to sit back and assess and go, okay, what is this moment teaching me now? Right? How is this moment going to escalate me forward? I think a lot of us unfortunately get caught in these setbacks and go, woe is me. And they feel, and they drop into, depression state and just going, man, my whole path, the trajectory that I was going is over. And you go, no, this is a moment to define, how am I going to come back stronger? And how am I going to learn from this particular moment in order to escalate me further than where I was, before? And so, listen to me, every one of us are going to have setbacks, and every one of us are going to be tripped up at some point. But I think the ability to sit back and understand, what is this actual moment trying to teach me? And if you can truly go through kind of that awareness standpoint, I think that's going to make us a better human being, but also just a better athlete in general, because you're going to have your mishits, you're going to have your block rights and slices and hooks and all this stuff. But at the same moment, give yourself time to wallow in it a little bit. But then at the same time, I can't be thinking about that shot, 5 shots down the road. I've got to allow myself to grieve it for a moment and then think about the next shot in life. Right. And so if I'm going to allow something to dictate my future from my past, that's where we get into trouble, right? And so when you're starting to reinforce those bad shot behaviors, and then in your mind you start to get into this, it is like me to hit a bad shot right here, then all of a sudden it's going to manifest itself into a bad shot. However, when you can say, it is like me to overcome that particular bad shot, and now watch what I can do, then all of a sudden you start to reinforce better behavioral patterns. For the simple fact, your next shot is what counts. It's not the shot that just happened that's going to define you. It's your next shot.
Powerful stuff. That's great. The what's nice to hear is, like, after 20 years, you're not saying you've made it, but you've, coached major champion, you're still evolving, you still got that growth mindset, you're still hungry and passionate for more. And I think that's a huge message for all of us as well, really.
For sure. I mean, listen, I think I'm always going to be an athlete in my mind, right? With that competitive nature. I mean, listen, I'm not a young buck anymore in the industry, but at the same time, I want to maintain my ability to stay as innovative as possible, be ahead of the game as much as possible. I want to be learning. I want to strive to become the best at what I do, right? And because I know that these young bucks are going to be chomping at my heels constantly, right? And the thing is it's not just for me, it's for the athlete that I work with on a day-to-day basis. I can't stagnate in my profession and then anticipate these athletes to go win majors or go win a tournament or whatever, for the simple fact that if I'm bringing my A game and they're trusting me to bring my A game every single time, now it begets this energy of going, I know I'm going to bring my A game every single session. I need to trust that you're going to bring your A game every single session as well. And so this exchange of trust between coach and athlete, because they know that I'm striving to constantly be my best, I need to understand and trust them that they're going to be becoming their best in every single scenario as well. And so it's this energy begets energy, or iron sharpening iron type scenario where, you know what, that's how the coach athlete trust relationship starts to really begin, right? And the moment that I feel like I'm slipping, I want them to fire me, right? And if they feel like they're not getting the best out of me, I want them to kick me to the curb, right? For the simple fact that it's a disservice to their ability to take their levels, to a higher level. And so I think, it's really interesting. And if we can take that same mentality into our everyday relationships, I mean, let alone just a coach athlete relationship, but at the same time, teacher student, or spouse relationship, or just even friendships. Listen, I'm going to bring my A game into this particular relationship. Now you're going to have your off days, right? And that's okay. But that's where that trust is really, you start to build a really cool foundation, because I know even in that off day, what my other athlete or teammate that I'm working with, they're going to help me through that. And then all of a sudden we've built this bond to surpass that off day, and that's okay. But at the same time, the energy begets energy is pretty huge.
Massive. And as a proud father to two young boys, is that are you trying to instill that mindset, that way of life into them? Or
yeah, talk about a game changer in golly, across the board. The moment that you become a parent, I think you get this weird new badge, right? And one, you're responsible for these little people, but my biggest thing with my boys is I'm never going to put pressure on them to say, oh, you are going to be the best athlete in the world, or you are going to be the best musician in the world. Far be it for me to ever put pressure on them to do that. I want them to find their own creativity in their world, but at the same time, I find it also my responsibility to expose them to a lot of different things, right? And so, they're 9 and 7 years old right now, and quite honestly, I want them to play as many sports as possible. I want them to paint. I want them to pick up an instrument. I want them to experience life. Life, right now for them is so adventurous, because there's so much stuff out there that they're trying to figure out who they are. My main thing with them is, listen, I've got 2 young boys, and when you have 2 young boys, I want them to grow up to be men of character, right? And be integrous, and hold true character, be a good person, be a good human, right? Love one another, the whole 9 yards. So how do you do that on a daily? You just show them, hey, you're trying to be a good example for it, right? Now sometimes I want to wring their necks, but at the same time, I always just keep it simple with them, and I just say, hey man, whatever you do, lead with love. And if it's playing on the pitch, or playing on the course, or bouncing a basketball, just lead with love for it. And even in friendships and relationships with family and friends, just lead with love with it, for the simple fact that you may not completely fall in love with the ability to hit a, golf ball, right? But you know what? I may fall in love with being out in nature. And then all of a sudden, wait a minute, golf is outside. Now I love nature. Oh, okay, now I can see the two start go hand in hand, right? And then all of a sudden, who cares if they're the most amazing arborist on the planet? That's awesome. They were exposed to it through playing golf, right? And so I think these, we get so caught up in specialization, especially here in the States. Oh my goodness, these young kids are specializing in sports way too early, right? And they're not getting exposed to a lot of these multiple sports. But in my mind, you take a look at a lot of the top athletes across the board in any sport, they played multiple sports growing up. They became a very rounded out athlete, right? But at the same time, they're not just multiple sports, they're very well-rounded people. And they like the arts, they like the music, they like, so I think in general, as a father, I just want my kids to be well-rounded, and I want them to just have good character, man, and you're gonna find something that you love to do, and even if it's accounting, okay, that's awesome, but be the best accountant you can be. And so whatever they find themselves falling in love with, I'm perfectly okay with, for a simple fact, if they enjoy it and find that they can make an impact doing whatever they're doing, then go for it.
Brilliant. Well, it sounds like you're being a wonderful role model to your kids, Damon. So, long may that continue, and good on you. That's it's great. When the multiple sport sort of topic there, when we last spoke, you came on to the show to speak to the juniors, and that was a sort of hot topic, really, which was play lots of sports, as a lot of top athletes do, and that was a wonderful conversation. And it's we just before we sort of come on air today, we were talking about Jordan come on to the call and spoke to the kids for a couple of minutes, and like I was asking you, did he realize how much of a role model, like how much of an impact he made by taking 2 minutes out of his life in his gym session? That was a pretty cool moment, wasn't it?
No, that was a lot of fun. I mean, these athletes have big occasions, obviously, when they're playing in the majors and these big tournaments, to be an influence on masses amount of people. But when they can take a moment out of their everyday and be able to just simply say hello to these kids, or sign an autograph, they have a great influence. And it's whether it be good or bad that these athletes are held in such high regard. The one thing that I want to push, even my top elite guys, is like, listen, you are a man of character, or you are a woman of character as well, and your influence is very massive. And so hold true to your character, because you never know what kid is watching. It's one of those quotes that I love is, and I'm a faith-based guy, so when great occasions for serving come seldom, but little ones surround us daily, right? And so to me, I've always had that quote in my mind. Even when I was a little kid, my father would instill that in me, is like, listen, we got great occasions for influence. They're very seldom. Majors are very seldom, right? But the little ones, they do surround us daily. And simply, I don't know, as an athlete, right, I don't know whose little eyes are watching. And so it's maybe a lot of pressure, but at the same time, I think it's a very good gift that these guys and girls can breathe into these juniors and inspire them a little bit.
Absolutely. Dame, just taking you back a step, going back to sort of being on tour the last 20 years, the evolution of strength training from 20 years ago to today has gone, well, I'd say from 1% to 100% of golfers doing it. And that over those years of evolution, there's been a lot of talk of training hurts your body, it damages you, it makes it. There's quite a lot of, I think people are starting to get educated, but there's a lot of negativity around that subject, saying, you know, we're not athletes, we shouldn't be doing it. What's your sort of response to that person who says, oh, don't go in the gym because you're going to get worse at bloody golf?
Yeah, I turn the tables back onto them as a consumer of sport, right? Let's take like the English Premier League, right? You know, every one of us sitting here watching right now. I'm actually, you know, watching the Chelsea game on replay. We want to be a fan of sport, right? I want to see an athlete do big things. I want to see a fast athlete. I want to see an athlete hitting the ball far. I want a pitcher in baseball. I want them to throw at a high velocity. I want them to do amazing things to entertain me, right? But I throw back the thought process back on the fan and go, okay, let's take golf. You want them to hit far. You want to see the speed. You want them to visually be an athlete, right? But at the same time, I'm going to get ticky-tack on the fact that I don't mind watching the EPL players or even the rugby players looking like athletes and being able to run for days and being able to hit hard. I understand that they train and they have to train for their sport, right? They're constantly in the weight room. They're constantly in the training room. They're constantly doing the recovery stuff. It's a very natural piece of their sport. But yet, I'm going to hold this golf athlete to the same regard, but then have a point of view that's very askew and go, well, don't do athletic things because it might affect your ability to hit the ball. It's so far off, because if they weren't, I mean, much like you just said, you know, whereas 15 years ago, it was 1% of the players doing it. Now it's 100% of the players. We visually can take a look at the field right now and visually see that the shape of the game is completely changed. These guys are athletes. They're, you know, they look young, they look fit. They're multi-dimensional type athletes. They're hitting the ball far. They're using speed to their advantage. Oh, by the way, they can put the lights out as well. And so now all of a sudden you have a very multifaceted athlete in the PGA Tour that has to stay on top of their game. What's the biggest piece, you know, what's a big piece that comes into play with that is, yeah, they need to work on the short game and skill sets and all this other aspect, but they have to, you know, integrate the performance piece. They have to integrate, you know, good nutrition. They have to integrate good sleeping patterns and good recovery patterns, for the simple fact they're entertainers. And so at the same time, if I, as a consumer of sport, want to be entertained, I also need to hold the golf athlete to the same regard as an EPL athlete for being a good athlete, right? And so now the evolution in the game, you know, in my mind, you know, jokingly, you know, calling Jordan, you know, kind of an older athlete now, it's actually kind of true. You know, I mean, you take a look at the evolution of the sport, even 10 years from now, they're going to be young, they're going to be hitting it far, they're going to look incredibly athletic. Maybe the tenure on them playing in the PGA might actually become shorter, just because the competition is greater, right? And so there's a lot of elements to start thinking about, just from an entertainment value standpoint. These are now athletes that are playing golf and playing at a very high level. And, you know, what we could have gotten away with 15 years ago, we can't get away with now, for the simple fact I need to feel as strong and as stable and as mobile on a Sunday afternoon in the last group as I did as a starting on a Thursday morning, you know, in my round of play. These athletes, you know, they have to travel, they have to, you know, sleep in new beds every week, they have to, you know, play in these pro-ams. I mean, they're constantly playing, right? It's a very unique sport, for the simple fact you're not going to find that in other sports. They're not constantly having to play. These guys constantly have to play, constantly have to travel, constantly have to just reestablish their routine. The rigors on the sport is very demanding. And so in order to offset that demand, I need to have the elements in play in order to help me recover well, right? And so, you know, when someone says, you know, that's going to impact their game and all, you know, they just, to me, they're being you know, a fuddy-duddy, for the simple fact they're probably looking themselves in the mirror and they don't want to actually embrace their own maybe inefficiencies to try to move and integrate their own fitness into their game. And so I'm going to call them on it and go, you know what? You're probably saying that for the simple fact that you haven't actually gotten into the weight room in the past 15 years. And so I'm going to throw a stone at an athlete playing a sport that you like for the simple fact I have to look at myself in the mirror and go, you know what? I haven't moved and I haven't taken care of the machine that I've been given for a long period of time. You know, movement is medicine. So for the simple fact that if I can allow somebody to look in the mirror, and I'm maybe calling some people out right now, I was like, listen, if you're going to throw a stone, you got to look at yourself first and go, you know what, how have I actually tested it out? Have I tested my theory out and actually gotten into the gym and see if it actually impacted my game? And then they kind of have a oh crap moment. Oh man, I actually feel better. Shoot. Well, that kind of takes my theory, down the drain. Yeah. So, to me, I think it's a good thrust for somebody to actually maybe start moving and rather than throwing stones on a theory that they have no pulse on.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. No, I totally agree with you. I think like some golfers of the past probably didn't help, like Montgomery maybe, right? One of the best golfers of all time, 7 European titles and all that. And I'm not saying he hasn't been in the gym. I don't know the bloke, but it certainly doesn't look like
But at the same time, you have to take a look at those old athletes, and I mean, they're pioneers in the thing, right? And so, you take a look at Colin, and I mean, my goodness, the guy moves so fluid, right? So there's an innate ability, a genetic predisposition for him to succeed, right? And so, and visually it may have been not so appealing, but at the same time, his movement was beautiful, and he got it done. You know what I mean? And so far be it, the technologies that we have and the study, the research that we have, it wasn't there during his time. And so he did best at what was given to him at that time, right? And so, now if he was playing now, I'm sure he would integrate a lot of this, or more so now than ever. He would probably integrate more of this performance piece into his game, just because there's more demand on his game, right?
He would have to hit it further as well, right? So
you would have to 100%. You would have to. Yeah, statistically, you can't disprove that to me. You got to hit it far. Sorry.
100%. Where do you see the game going in like another 10 years? I think Bryson, this year, last year, sort of moved the needle. I think Tiger did 15 years ago. Like, where do you see that going?
Well, I mean, you're going to have these injections of these individuals that, much like you said, Tiger definitely set the precedent of these athletes being super strong and looking like an athlete. You take a guy like Bryson, and you know what? It was very entertaining to see him hit the ball very far. It was very entertaining to see him push the needle on how far he can get, how much speed he can get. But what people got to realize is Bryson, at the same time at the U.S. Open, was the best putter that week as well. And so where I see the game, quite honestly, is I got to give kudos to Bryce. I mean, for the simple fact he challenged the game a little bit to see if he can push and move the needle a little bit. I'm gonna really project and just say, hey, listen, we're gonna see even more so the evolution of the athlete in this game. The stats are going to become very, very tight on us, right? And that's why I find golf so beautiful. Is you can have all the speed on the planet that you want to, and you can hit it as far as you want to. But the simple fact is, I got to get the short stick and put that ball in the hole. And so I'm dealing with two very, very different demands as an athlete that I've got to master. And oh, by the way, short game's got to be pretty solid as well, right? And so there's a third element that comes into play. There's a lot of these nuances and very beautiful nuances for these athletes, right? And are we going to see, courses having to change distances, things like that? I don't necessarily think so. I just think, honestly, the tenure of these athletes on tour are going to start to match more so like the NFL than here in the States, or NBA, where, they may have a career that's maybe 5, 6, 7 years, not 15, 20 years. Right? For the simple fact, these athletes are going to get better and better and better and better. And so maybe the tenure on the PGA becomes a little bit more less, if you will. I think that's going to be the big shift. It's going to be a long game. The putting is going to be out of this world. We're just going to see all these numbers start to tighten up a whole heck of a lot. And I think the careers for these guys are going to become shorter. And, when the iron is hot, you better strike, because it might be 2 years where you're going to be really, really hot. I don't think we're going to see guys that are going to win 30 majors anymore, or even more than 10, for the simple fact that, we've got young crop of athlete constantly coming through. And I think the days of seeing, these guys staying number one in the world for 3-4 years in a row, it just is not going to happen anymore.
It's interesting. It's interesting very much. So I think, yeah. So just to be clear, like, what's the main purpose there? Oh, so not purpose. What's the main reason you're saying their career span's going to be shorter?
Just for a simple fact, I think, because you take a look at, you deal with a lot of the young athletes now. The young athletes that we're dealing with now are very distinctly different than 10 years ago as well. They're more athletic. They're more educated about the game. The technology is unbelievable, with, the clubs as well. So when we start to take a look at sports, I'll use NBA and NFL for example. Very difficult to get into becoming an NBA athlete, right? As we see it, PGA is incredibly difficult to get your PGA Tour card. It is not easy at all. It's even more difficult to maintain your PGA Tour card right now, right? And so we're seeing these top athletes that have been on top of their game for a long period of time, slipping down into the world ranking, slipping down into, oh man, I don't have my my PGA Tour card this year. Take a guy like, Luke Donald, the type of guys, they're amazing athletes, right? And at one point, top of the world. And I think those periods of time are, because of the level of athlete that's going to be entering into the professional ranks, are going to be such a well-rounded and a very high-performing athlete. It's not going to be these one-offs. It's going to be groups of individuals that are going to be elite at their game, coming into the sport and graduating into the PGA Tour level. I just think the demand and the level of play is going to be so high here within the next 10 years that it's going to be difficult for an athlete to maintain that high level of play on a consistent basis for 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe even 10 years. I think it really is going to be a 5 to 7 year window of being at that peak performance, and hopefully they can win a few tournaments at that window. I just think it's going to be a shorter window, honestly.
That's good. Like, what's it going to look like in 100 years?
They're not going to have to hit the ball. They just tell their robot to do it. Or maybe we'll go and get into full contact golf or something. I don't know. That would be kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, who knows? I think if you sort of to look back 100 years ago and you're saying you're not going to use wooden clubs, you'll use metal ones.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, a new set's going to cost the same amount as a car.
They already do, man.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. So, yeah. Is it just going back to football? You're watching Chelsea.
Yeah.
Chelsea? Why? Yeah. Are they your team?
For some reason, even when I was back in college, it was my team. I don't know why. Yeah, it's just one of those things. Yeah, it would be far be it for me to say it was like, here in the States with the Major League Soccer. That's kind of like B team, the level of play. Actually, it's improved quite a bit, the Major League Soccer here in the States. But yeah, I'm just a fan of just really quality football. And and some might disagree with me saying Chelsea has a quality football year in, year out. But when I take a look at Champions League, all that, I mean, I'm just a fan of watching these amazing athletes be able to perform at these high levels. And it's just, to me, it's one of, I'm biased, it's one of the most beautiful sports to watch, just because I can see the dance with the ball. Much so is, when you take a look at the golf swing, I mean, when it's done well, it's very beautiful. If you can really take a look at it from a biomechanics standpoint and go, man, this individual was able to get every single joint in the body to perform at a really, quality level, recruit every single muscle, neurologically recruit things at a high level, and then produce this amazing ball flight with a very small ball and a very small club face. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, and it ends up being very beautiful, and it's done well. And so the human body, to me, it amazes me that they can produce some very beautiful movements repeatedly, over a span of a round or even 4 days. It's uncanny to me. I just love the physics behind it, the biomechanics behind it. It's just, to me, it's really cool.
It's interesting stuff. Who's your favorite athlete in the Premier League? As in, like, from a biomechanical sort of background, perhaps, the way he just moves beautifully, like Federer does, perhaps on a tennis court, or I don't know.
Oh man, it's hard. Honestly, it's hard to pinpoint one of them from a biomechanics standpoint. I mean, you take a look at it's the same level of play for these defenders all the way to these strikers. And to me, I will say any goalkeeper in the EPL right now, to me, is probably one of the more biomechanically sound individuals possible. Here's my defense on this, right? Is, as a striker, you've got to have a lot of mental peace on your proper runs and things like that, right? And as a defender, you've got to mark well and understand it. But as a goalkeeper, I mean, listen, the demands on a goalkeeper now, even you could take a look at the evolution of the EPL, when the way they play now in the past 10 years, right? The way that it's played, the keeper is very much involved right now, and in the flow of play happens through a lot of the keeper's aspects. But so I've got to have a goalkeeper that can actually defend the goal, but also have very proper footwork. To me, that's a superb athlete. You put a striker back in the keeper position, they're not going to be able to do that, but if I can have a keeper that actually has some decent footwork, as well as defend the goal with a lot of tenacity, to me, those are the most high demand athletes on the field right now, because it's just, they have a high demand on their performance at every level. So, and to me, I'll equate that to a golfer, because I can drive it really far, but I also have to putt at the same time, right?
Sure.
And so to me, a keeper is like that. Is like, I have to defend the goal, but at the same time, I have to have the footwork. And so it's all the elements of the game that are coming into play. And so to me, those are two parallels that I'll come into play with.
I thought you were just going to say Pulisic. What's his name?
100% Pulisic. Yeah.
I thought you were just going to say he's the best.
As a matter of fact, I was commenting on it this morning. You know what? The kid is an athlete, an absolute athlete, and probably, unfortunately, one of the only strikers that the States has produced in probably 40 years. But yeah, he's a good player, a really good player.
He is. Okay, Damon, let's go. I've sort of heard the term healthy body, healthy mind. I'm sure there is some science behind it. can you go perhaps down that rabbit hole for me to help me and the listeners understand that if your body's in better shape, how you can mentally, as you said, the players have got, they're at 5-hour rounds, they're practicing before, after interviews to stay sane. They've got to be healthy, right? So talk through that.
Well, and I like that saying, I do. Let me propose reframing it a little bit and say freedom of motion equals freedom of mind, right? Here's what I mean by this. Like you said, I mean, the demand of just even the course of play, I'm playing for 5 hours. And then prior to that, I was on the driving range. Prior to that, I had to go into a warm up. Post round, I've got to go do my cool down stuff. Maybe I had a couple miss hits, so I'm going to go on the range, try to practice that. And then all of a sudden now I've got a 10-hour day out there, right? Things are going to tighten up. Things are going to be a high demand physically on the body. When golf is, it's a static sport. I'm not in constant movement, right? I'm not doing a Happy Gilmore type swing, just running up on top of the ball and swinging as hard as I can. It's a static sport. And so it's very predictable on this. If this is going on in the body, if this thing is tight or if this area is weak, then this is going to happen in the golf swing. It's very, very predictable in nature. So when there are inhibitions in the body or tightness in the body, that's going to inhibit my ability to be fluid in the golf swing. Then all of a sudden I've got to create different swing thoughts in order to accommodate this inefficiency in the body. And so when I take a look, one of my favorite things is going to the driving range and watching a lot of amateurs try to whack at the ball. You see a very big variety of swings, right? And swing characteristics, albeit or some are very comical and some actually are pretty okay. But when I take a look at the body and I take a look at the swing, I go, man, okay, this is probably what's going on in their body. And it's manifesting in the way they actually swing the golf club. Because they've got to reroute their path in order to accommodate a body inefficiency or a movement inefficiency. Okay. So that's why I say, freedom of motion equals freedom of mind. When I am when I'm on top of the ball and I know that my body is going to be moving well and I have freedom of movement, I'm not inhibited, I don't have inefficiencies of movement. I know that I'm going to call upon my brain to make these really cool connections with the body and create a very fluid golf swing. Right. And so now I'm not inundated with a lot of different swing thoughts because now I can just swing the golf club and perform at a high level. Right. Now, is that the goal is to be very repeatable with that. Right. And so the idea with freedom of motion equals freedom of mind is when we're in the gym and we're doing proper mobility work or proper stability work or even proper strengthening work, every piece of the puzzle comes to the ability to move well, right, and have that freedom of motion. So you're very purposeful in your movements in the gym in order to create freedom of motion out on the golf course. And so therein lies that freedom of mind. And I'll speak just personally to it is, I had a year ago a pretty major surgery in the core, right? And so, I had to rehab the core and rehab my mobility and rehab everything. My inability to move and rotate really and significantly played an impact on my game. And so I had to reroute my swing in order to accommodate a pretty significant inhibition through a very key element in the golf swing, the core, right? And so it took a long period of time in the gym to have a very concerted effort in order to improve the strength, improve the mobility, improve the stability. And then now, prior to another surgery I had to have, I was swinging it incredibly well. Again, I had freedom of motion, freedom of mind, right? So I got back to the level that I was playing, but it took a long period of time. Now I think about amateurs and their, a lot of times, their freedom of mind is just sort of a simple fact. I don't know how to swing a golf club. I've never been taught very well or never been taught at all. I don't know how, right? And so those restrictions in the mind with swing thoughts can actually go vice versa and actually create restrictions in the body, right? And so the mind-body connection is very beautiful. We're here in our industry is, we're understanding the gut-brain axis is very important, right? What goes on in the gut is actually controlling what's going on in the brain from a microbiome level and all this stuff. But at the same time, I'm a big believer in, that gut-brain axis, but at the same time, that freedom of motion is going to have a converse relationship with freedom of mind as well. When I have restrictions in my brain with swing thoughts, there may be a lot of inhibitions or inefficiency of movement in the body. And so that's where you have to have purpose-filled moments on the range, but also purposeful moments on the gym, knowing exactly what you're going to be working on in order to create fluidity in your play, right? And so fluidity to me is very important. I mean, we can all envision a very beautiful swing, and that's where hopefully we can hopefully. Oh, there you are. Sorry. Hopefully we can, create that freedom of motion, freedom of mind through our concerted work.
Beautiful. Love that. Just on that gut and mind relationship, going to Jordan when he putts, or sometimes when he putts, he looks at the hole rather than the ball. Can you talk us through perhaps a bit more in detail why Jordan occasionally sometimes does that?
Yeah. So, when we start to take a look at that, I mean, obviously someone has the capacity to do that for the simple fact that they've had enough repetitions behind them to perform that type of movement. But what that simply does is, I'll go back to that freedom of motion, freedom of mind. When he sees himself looking at the hole, he's already envisioned the path and the direction and tempo and the speed of the putter. He knows exactly what's going on with that. There is a restrictive piece sometimes for him when he's looking at the ball. There may be it builds a restriction in the hands and in the body. And so what it does is it builds a release valve, if you will, looking at the hole, envisioning that ball going in. Then all of a sudden it already presets his tempo and pace for his stroke. And so it's something that, was discovered a very long time ago with him. It's just, he becomes very comfortable when he does that. And his tempo is absolutely beautiful when he does it too. So it's just kind of a release valve piece.
Love it. Like recently, he hasn't been doing that perhaps so much. Is that because he's not confident enough to do that, or is that just a load of rubbish?
No, I wouldn't ever say. I mean, confidence is always a nebulous thing. We're always in the chase of confidence in the golf swing, right? And so I think you're going to have undulations in behavioral patterns, right? Especially when it comes to very nuanced swing, like the putting stroke, right? And so there's going to be different undulations and the way we approach our setup, the way we approach looking at the hole, not looking at the hole. I mean, we're going to undulate quite a bit, but we're in that nebulous kind of search of perfection, always searching for perfection in that, and we're always going to be trying different things, albeit we're never going to introduce something that's going to be a negative result to it. But when we're very concerted effort on biomechanical change or even neurological change, it's always going to lead to a grander result. Now, something may take time, and so I think that's where probably most of the fans will go, okay, this is taking a little bit longer than it should. Well, you know what, that's fine. It may, but the result of it is going to be a very amazing result. So
fab. That's great. Okay, Damon. So for the listeners listening, can you talk us through sort of why it's so important for the average golfer to stretch or go to the gym, or what is the most important thing for them to do? Let's say like an average golfer, 55, 15 handicap.
Yeah. Quite honestly, let's keep it simple and very attainable, right? 55, we probably, we've raised the kids. We're, just trying to enjoy a round of golf, and it's a moment where, we still feel young, mentally, but physically we look in the mirror and go, man, I'm not moving as well as I needed to. Listen, let's keep it very simple. I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. Movement is medicine, right? Literally any movement is medicine. If I can get that 55-year-old athlete to just simply go on a walk, right? And, walking is probably more underrated elements of exercise possible. Here's why. Because walking, I'm getting the entire body moving. I'm also out in nature. I'm having to control my breathing patterns as well. There's a lot of things that transcend just what's happening just by a simple walk, right? So walk every day, move every day, right? If you have the capacity to go see somebody that actually can do a proper assessment on your movement, that's going to be pretty crucial. However, let's say if we don't have access to that, then all of a sudden I want to go into some mobility work. The areas that I want to focus on really from a mobility standpoint, from a 55-year-old type golfer, I want to work on a lot of ankle mobility. I want to work a lot on hip mobility. I want to work on a lot of mid-spine mobility, or something called your thoracic spine, right? If I can improve those three areas of your mobility, I'm going to make a significant impact in your ability to play the golf game. Right. So feel like I'm an athlete, stay in my setup position, hold my posture, and actually get around, through a full swing is going to be pretty paramount. Now I'm working on hip mobility. I'm working a lot of internal, external rotation in my hips as well, just trying to get, my Elvis hips back, if you will. Right. A lot of guys were, in the office sitting in a chair. We're in a very linear, very straightforward plane. And then we anticipate ourselves to go step out on the golf course and play in a rotary sport, right? And so if I can actually improve my rotational ability through my hips and my spine, that's going to be a really paramount thing. So two things, at that moment, energy begets energy. Let's just start them walking a little bit and working a little bit of mobility on a daily basis. That's going to beget a lot of opportunities for them down the road to feel a little bit better, and maybe introduce a little bit more stability work. And then once they get a little bit more balance in their life, then all of a sudden they go, you know what, I want to feel strong again. Then they can start introducing strength work. And so everything works in progressions, right? But the simple fact, I just need to get the person moving, right? And honestly, if I can get them sleeping better, it sounds weird, but if I can get that individual to sleep a little bit better, they're going to feel a heck of a lot better during the day, and they're going to feel a lot more energy throughout the day to do more activity, right? So I'm going to attack, the sleep. I'm going to attack them just taking a walk, and then down the road we'll start working on balance, strength, and then we'll actually really get focused on the nutrition.
Love that. Talk me through sleep, Damon. Like, I've got my Whoop band. I'm like obsessed with it. I don't like. I'm a bit obsessed with it, but I don't know how to improve it. So, like, yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, listen, we're very sleep deprived across the board, right? The biggest issue that I see is the very thing that we're on right now, technology, right? We're always inundated with technology, whether it be television or my iPhone or some type of form of electronics going on. My biggest recommendation for individuals to improve what we coin as sleep hygiene, right, is let's turn off the electronics about an hour and a half before my bedtime. Let's introduce some kind of old school, actually reading a book, right? Weird concept, actually reading a book, right? But by nature of having a dimmer light, by nature of me physically turning pages and actually reading a book prior to bedtime or journaling or whatever it may be, you're not getting inundated with a lot of the, we hear a lot about blue lights and all this invasive nature of what's going on in the, through the electronics that we use. So when we can shut it off about an hour and a half before bedtime, I am starting to preset a routine in the brain, preset a circadian rhythm into the brain and into the body that it goes, hey, this is bedtime. Now I need to slow some things down, get better, get into a better brain waves, get better in breathing patterns. And then all of a sudden my body starts to respond. It goes, okay, now I know that this is bedtime. I am going to try to fall asleep a little bit better. Then some elements of getting into some deeper sleep, is pretty paramount. We want to get about 25% of our sleep minimum. We want to get into that REM type sleep, deep sleep, if you will. What happens at night is it's a very regenerative moment. This is when our cells recover and replenish, and especially when our brain can replenish itself as well. And so when we start to sleep deprive ourselves, we're depriving our body's ability to recover and regenerate, cell structure. And so when I'm sleep deprived, I'm really kind of, running on an empty tank, especially in the morning, right? So the better that I can start to attack my sleeping patterns and improve my sleep hygiene, I've turned off all electronics an hour and a half before bedtime. I've set the temperature in my home at a cooler level than normal. I might I want to have a dark room. Whatever element that improves the hygiene of your sleep is going to really play a significant role on how you perform on the very next day. Right now, everyone anticipates a very miraculous, 2-day recovery on this. Listen, it takes time for the body to respond, and so if you can do it over a week or 2-week period of time, you're really going to start to see a better output of deeper sleep, but you're also going to see a better energy output during the day. And so just improving some elements of just shutting things down earlier, actually maybe journaling at night or reading a book at night prior to bed, keeping dim lights, keep it cool in the evening, maybe get a heavier comforter or whatever you use for, covering. And it's, create a dark space for the room, get into the deeper patterning of sleep. But just remember, we all used to be, farmers, and we worked the land and everything. We didn't have to have alarm clocks. We just got up, right? And we fell asleep. And so, we start to take a look at probably when we fell asleep, it was probably around 7 o'clock rather than our 11 o'clocks, right? This is because it was dark and there was no, we didn't have any clubs to go to, right? And so, so our circadian rhythm that we start to build for ourselves, we're really equipped to get about 8 to 10 hours of sleep. We just deprive ourselves of it. So in the hustle and bustle of everything, it's not in the hustle that makes everything. It's actually in the recovery that makes everything.
Fantastic. Love it. That's a great insight. Difficult to do, mind, but yeah, you've got to be strict and well, yeah, we'll see if I can implement it.
Yes.
Be disciplined.
Yeah.
But Damon, I'm super conscious of your time. We've massively overrun. I'm looking at my sheet and I haven't asked half the questions. And I thought we'd go on a
we'll
tangent.
Have to do it again. Yeah.
Well, that'd be awesome. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
Where do the guys find out about you? What's your website?
Yeah, no, you can go to social. Goddard. Yeah, no, go to website. It's going to be goddardspn.com. That's GODDARD SPN.com. And then just follow me on Instagram. That's usually the best. It's just Damon_Goddard. And it's fairly entertaining. We'll try to get better at entertaining on the social side. So, but yeah, so those are the two sides that people can follow me at.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Damon, and all the best. Speak to you soon.
Yeah, likewise. Take care, guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye.